There's a kind of ritual at the end of every year. Some of you might be a part of it, which is that maybe a couple weeks before New Year's, you start to get email from Wikipedia. And Wikipedia says, hey, do you ever use Wikipedia? Because if you do, maybe you could donate a little bit. I always have an aha moment when it comes. I don't think about it all year. And I'm not constantly on Wikipedia at this stage of my life. But sometimes I find myself checking something out. It's just it's just there. It's so easy. It's free for me. And the offering is made freely. And then this message comes at the end of the year that says, yes, this offering is made freely, but it isn't free. And I always have to kind of readjust and say, oh, right. Right. So they ask for some small amount, and I try to give that small amount. And I understand when I do that, that partly I'm supporting something that supports me, but also that I'm a part of the thing. I'm a part of the offering now. I'm part of offering it to someone else, which is important. I wanted to talk about dana today because I've been talking about dana at the beginning of the year for a while. It's the first of the paramitas. It's the first of the perfections. If we want to find a starting place, especially in a practice like this one, where we talk about offering, where we talk about this thing that we're giving, starting from dana, starting from generosity, is a pretty good starting point. It's at least something for us not to lose sight of. So I went looking in Shobo Genzo to find where Dogen talks about dana. And it comes up in a few places. I wrote some things down, if I can get to them. Famously, he speaks of the Bodhisattva Shishobo. These are the 4 ways in which bodhisattvas bring people to the Dharma. And the 4 ways are through giving, through kind words, through helpful deeds, and through participation, all of which are giving. It's all giving. In that framework, there is one way in which bodhisattvas attract people to this practice and to these teachings. And it's through generosity. It's through generosity in all the forms that generosity might take. So that's one place that Dogen talks about it. But I stumbled upon a text that we rarely talk about and that I have not given much attention to because it's a little bit technical. It's a chapter called Kankin. Kankin means sutra reading. And in it, he's really just describing in a very kind of almost like a manual how sutras might be offered in a monastery if someone requests them. But in that, he goes into the idea of the donor. There are these ceremonies, and I was part of these ceremonies when I was in the monastery. Someone would come to the monastery and they would make a donation and they would say, would you please read some sutras? And of course you say, okay. And then at the meal time, the donor would be invited to eat with everyone else. But before they ate, they were taken on a kind of tour. There's a special incense holder that's portable, and there would be an attendant to the donor, and they would walk with the donor, and they would bring them into the places where you usually don't go, with the smoke kind of obscuring the way. Let them touch the space, and then bring them out. And then there's this moment using this is called the tsuichin. Behind me, it's this kind of stump. There's a mallet. And there's a monk who waits there. And at the right time, they hit the mallet and they read, "The two gifts of wealth and dharma are incalculable in their merit. The dana paramita is fulfilled and perfected." And then later there's the service that they requested. I think that if we come to this practice in the way that most of us do, which is probably through Zazen, or maybe through philosophy, we come to a moment like this, and there's a little bit of a, what's going on here? This is this whole ceremony for someone, and it's all about the money, right? They gave some money, and then they get kind of a little special treatment, and then this kind of dedication says, it refers to the two gifts of wealth and dharma, which feels so wrong, right? If you're like me, it feels wrong. If you were taught to believe that money is a little bit dirty or that money is not spiritual, it feels wrong. Because the dharma is the dharma, and money is over here. So I think we need to talk about this. Years ago, I attended a meeting with someone who kind of coaches nonprofits to be successful nonprofits. And one of the things that this person said in the meeting was, they asked, "Do you know the difference between nonprofits that thrive and nonprofits that die?" And we all, tell us this, we want to know. And they said, nonprofits that die are afraid to talk about money. And we all felt so uncomfortable because none of us wanted to talk about money. That was 20 years ago. I still don't want to talk about money, to be honest. But we need to look at this ritual. We need to look at what happens. I've been talking about making an offering, that what we do is we make an offering. How does that work? I have another story I think about a lot. I was at my teacher's temple, I was working in the kitchen, and I knew that there was this young family that was visiting out in the main hall with my teacher. They had come kind of unexpectedly, and my teacher had rushed to put on robes, and he was talking to them, and I was doing something else. So I could hear them I could just hear their voices. And then after a while, I heard my teacher, he read the Heart Sutra, and he hit all the bells. And then there was a little more talking, and you could hear people saying goodbye. And then my teacher came into the kitchen wearing all his robes, and he was kind of chuckling, and he kind of rolled his eyes. And I said, "Who were they?" And he said, "Oh," he said, "the young guy is running for city council. And he's going to the temples and he's asking everybody to chant for him to win the election." And he said, he just has no idea how this works or what this is for. And I said, but you chanted. And he said, yeah. He said, but after I explained that it won't help him at all, it's not a transaction. I don't want to pretend that it isn't sometimes, in the sense that people on both sides of this can start to feel like it is. There are other temples in that town that I think maybe took the money and said, oh yeah, we'll chant the special chant that you need for this price. There are cases where that man walked away thinking that that was a very good deal that I got. This is going to help. That happens. But even when that is happening on the surface, I want to make clear that is not what's happening. No matter who asks you to chant, no matter who you say you're chanting for, at the end, we say all beings throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, mahaprajna paramita. All of these offerings go to the same place, which is to everyone, which means never to that one person. You can participate in the offering, but you can't manipulate the offering for yourself. I think back to Wikipedia. I have friends who, when, years ago when Wikipedia was kind of new and exciting, they were involved in it. They would create pages and then they would kind of police it. So they would put down their facts, and then when someone came and put down a falsehood, they were ready and they would jump back on and they would replace it with facts. And in that way, they were making the thing. That also is an offering. And that's usually the offering that we think about, right? Because that's the thing we see. That's the thing that we benefit from. That's the part that we go to, that we watch, that we read. It's the benefit. It's kind of the fun part. And behind that, though, there's servers. And there are people who work at desks. And they just kind of make sure the whole thing works. They don't do the fun part. It's not particularly interesting, I'm guessing. But that's also the offering. And you can't have one without the other. And if we all decided that the version of Wikipedia that we wanted was the one where we're all just adding stuff and we don't do the other part, it crashes. It's the story, as I understand it, of Easter Island. Right? Making these offerings of these statues that must have felt so meaningful. They must have felt so powerful. And draining a landscape of the resources to do it until one day you look up and the system is broken. We have to look at both sides. So when that donor comes to the monastery and receives all this attention, this respect, it's not trying to butter that person up. It's not saying, hey, you know, we uh, we respect you because you're rich or because you're generous. It's showing respect because that person is as much a part of the offering as the person who is leading the ceremony, as the person who is chanting. And that person is usually invisible. That person doesn't do the fun part, or the dressing up part, or the part where people say, "Thank you, that was beautiful." They remain unseen and unknown. But without them, it wouldn't happen. When we think about dana, when we think about giving, I think we have to be careful about not only understanding how things work, but understanding all the ways in which giving can be self-serving. We choose sometimes to give in the ways that feel best to us. And giving is giving is giving, but we may be ignoring another part. We may be ignoring a part that doesn't feel as good, but is as necessary. I was speaking the other day with the board about, I have this image, I've always had this image of a furnace. That what we're doing in this practice is we're kind of building and feeding a furnace. In Japan, this works in a very particular way because the monasteries are the furnace. There are a few of them, there aren't that many. But everyone understands, not everyone, people in that world understand that there's a kind of practice that's happening 24 hours a day. There's a lot of heat that's generated through that practice. It's producing the monks, it's producing the teachings, it's producing the teachers. And that heat from those monasteries reaches out to these regional temples, these big regional temples. And those regional temples do big ceremonies and they do big practice. Not as big as the monasteries, but big. And that distributes that heat out to local temples. And in local temples, it's distributed into the local community. So that if the system works, there are people who feel this warmth in all directions and they don't know where the warmth originated. That's success. They encounter someone who is being generous, who is using kind words, who is being helpful. And it's because this heat transferred all the way from this building in the mountains 100 miles away to their kitchen. My vision of building Sensoji was that we would try to do that we would try to generate some heat. That people here on the ground would gather just like this, and we would ring bells and we would chant and we would sit. And maybe that heat would carry 1,000 miles. And then it would carry out your door 1,000 miles away. That's the idea. The donor in the monastery, the one that Dogen is talking about, is someone who found their way to the source of the heat and said, I want to stoke this fire. That's the role I want to play. We don't talk about it. And it isn't just about us. It's about anything that supports. It's about any fire that you want to make hotter. But I wanted to take the opportunity today at the beginning of the year to remind all of us that that part is essential and that that part is beautiful. That the other parts, the sitting and the chanting and the bowing, they're like the out breath to that in breath. We should pay attention to it and we should offer it respect. And that's where I'll stop.